Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Grant and Claire lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a residential neighborhood where tree-lined streets and perfectly kept gardens gave the area a quiet charm. Anyone passing through could tell they were active members of the community, always greeting neighbors, showing up at local events, remembered as a model couple. People often saw them together at the farmers' market on Saturdays, walking side by side, picking out fresh fruits and vegetables, laughing at little inside jokes. It was a picture of stability, companionship, and genuine affection, something that, to an outsider, seemed unshakable. Grant worked as a logistics manager for a company serving much of the metro area, a role that required attention to deadlines, team coordination, and quick solutions to unexpected problems. He was respected by co-workers, admired for the calm way he handled high-pressure situations. Claire, on the other hand, was an administrative coordinator at a busy physical therapy clinic popular with athletes and recovering patients. She had a reputation for being organized, efficient, and capable of handling any daily challenge. Both had demanding routines, but they managed to keep a good balance between work and personal life, making time to be together. Their closeness showed in small habits. On Sunday mornings, Grant would make coffee while Claire picked out music for the house. During the week, they made sure to coordinate when they got home so they could eat dinner together, even if it was something simple. When one had a rough day, the other knew exactly how to help, whether it was just being quietly present or offering encouraging words. This connection carried over to social events, where they were rarely seen apart. At family gatherings, Claire was always nearby, talking with everyone, while Grant made sure guests were comfortable and well taken care of. Close friends often said Grant and Claire were proof that it's possible to keep romance alive even after years together. There were no stories of serious fights or long-term conflicts. Disagreements, when they happened, were settled quickly, without yelling or slammed doors. They didn't need grand gestures to show their love, just watching the way one looked at the other during casual conversations was enough. This consistency in how they treated each other reinforced the image of a solid, healthy relationship. Among the important people in Grant's life was Dylan, his best friend since his single days. They'd shared countless outings, spontaneous trips, and long nights talking about life. After Grant started dating Claire, their hangouts became less frequent, not out of disinterest, but because his routine changed with the relationship. Still, whenever they met up, it was clear their friendship hadn't weakened over time. Dylan respected his friend's space but stayed in touch, knowing he could call Grant anytime and get a response. The couple's routine was as predictable as it was comfortable. During the week, each followed their schedule, exchanging quick messages between work tasks, usually just checking in or planning dinner. On Fridays, they liked trying new restaurants around town, and on Sundays they kept the habit of visiting Claire's parents, who lived just a few miles away. Charlotte offered the perfect mix of city pace and neighborhood life, which suited them well. On social media, their photos only reinforced what everyone already believed. Trips, special meals, birthday celebrations, everything came with short but heartfelt captions. Friends commented enthusiastically, family members left warm messages. Nothing stood out as unusual. Whether someone knew them well or just casually, everyone assumed they were looking at a couple immune to the usual relationship struggles. At that moment, nothing suggested their story could take a different turn. There were no signs of growing apart, no secrets, no strange behavior. To Grant, life with Claire was exactly what he'd always wanted, and to everyone around them, they represented the kind of love that seemed built to last. On a Thursday morning, while reviewing a budget at the office, Grant noticed a notification lit up in the corner of his phone screen. He grabbed it without thinking, expecting a banking update, an automated message, or maybe something from the family group chat. But when he unlocked it, he saw a message from Dylan. No greeting, no explanation. Just an image. He tapped the image, and when it fully loaded, the impact was immediate. Grant held his breath without realizing, eyes locked on the screen. It was a screenshot from a dating app. At the top of the image was a woman's profile, her face clearly visible. It wasn't just a resemblance. There was no room for doubt. The woman in the photo was Claire. Exactly her. The same burgundy blouse she'd worn a few weeks earlier at lunch at his parents' house, the same subtle smile, the same loose hair falling over her left shoulder. It was a photo he remembered perfectly, now appearing abruptly in a completely unexpected context. The name on the profile wasn't Claire's. A short, feminine name, one he'd never associate with his wife. The city was correct, the age too. Below the photo was a generic description, the kind seen on so many profiles: someone who enjoys good wine, travel, and deep conversations. Anyone could have written that, but the combination of details made him uneasy. For a few seconds, Grant froze. His mind seemed unable to process what he was seeing. It was as if everything around him had gone silent and he was trapped inside that screen. It took a long time before he could look away. His first attempt at explanation was automatic. It was a fake profile. Someone had taken a public photo of Claire, maybe from Instagram, maybe from Facebook, and created a fake identity. That happened all the time. People with no scruples set up profiles like this to deceive strangers, gain attention, run scams, or just mess with others for fun. It was a plausible possibility. But something about that image deeply unsettled him. The photo was recent. He remembered the day Claire had taken that selfie. They'd been running late, and she'd stopped in the hallway just to snap that picture. He'd even joked, urging her to hurry, telling her she already looked beautiful enough without checking herself in the mirror. It was that exact photo, the very same one. It didn't seem like something pulled from public social media. It felt too intimate, too personal. Doubt began to form quietly. He tried to rationalize, to downplay it, to find comforting explanations. But at the same time, something inside him whispered another possibility, one he didn't want to face. What if it wasn't a fake profile? What if Claire was actually behind that account? The idea seemed absurd. Their marriage was solid, easy, full of closeness. They laughed together, cooked together, made plans. She'd never given him any reason to suspect anything. Never. And yet, there it was, this image, this profile with a different name but the same face he knew better than anyone else's. Grant put his phone away and looked around, as if hoping someone else had seen it, as if the embarrassment of an unfounded suspicion had already put him on the defensive. The office environment remained unchanged, co-workers moving around with their coffee cups, focused on their daily tasks. Everything carried on as normal, except inside him. He thought about texting Dylan, asking where he'd seen that profile, but decided against it. The fewer people involved, the better. This was something that needed to be handled quietly and carefully. For now, he just needed to think. Process it. Breathe. He decided to stick to his usual behavior. He wouldn't change the tone of his conversations with Claire, wouldn't ask indirect questions, wouldn't alter their routine. But once that doubt was planted, it couldn't be ignored. Silence wouldn't erase what he'd seen, and no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise, something about his view of the marriage had already changed. Grant didn't mention it to anyone. In the days that followed, he kept to his routine with his usual precision, the same good mood at work, the same habits at home. In front of Claire, he made an effort to seem completely natural, not changing his tone or showing any shift in behavior. He kept everything inside, as if the doubt were a dangerous secret too risky to share. But inside, the storm grew. After 4 days living with that corrosive uncertainty, he made a decision. He created a fake profile on the same dating app. He spent nearly an hour thinking through the details. It had to be convincing, but also match the kind of person who might attract Claire's interest, assuming she was really behind that profile. He chose a simple name, a generic face from a stock image, and a carefully crafted description: lover of contemporary literature, fan of California wines, amateur photographer, passionate about small towns and long conversations. He knew these points aligned with his wife's real interests. He picked a nearby city, as if he were someone close but not exactly local. He adjusted the age to be close to his own, but not identical, no need to raise suspicion. With the profile ready, he started browsing the app until, after a few minutes, he found the same profile from the screenshot. Claire's photo, now under that strange name. He clicked on it, read everything again, analyzed every detail. It was her. The expressions, the listed interests, the way she described herself. Everything screamed Claire. He took a deep breath and sent the first message, a light comment about a book quote she'd mentioned in her description. The reply came the same day, just a few hours later. Short, friendly, polite. As if she were just opening the door to meet someone new. Grant kept the conversation going calmly, always respecting the boundaries of the character he'd created. He couldn't rush. In the days that followed, he replied once a day, sometimes twice. The goal was to build a rhythm, a connection. And as they exchanged messages, something inside him twisted. The way this person wrote, the words they used, the expressions, they were identical to Claire's. Small language quirks, subtle references, details only he would notice. 2 weeks passed. The conversation, once formal and neutral, started to feel lighter. Inside jokes began to appear. Comments about daily life, music preferences, opinions on movies. Claire, or whoever was pretending to be her, seemed increasingly engaged with this fake profile. Grant found himself torn between the discomfort of feeding this lie and the urgency to uncover the truth. Each new message confirmed what he was starting to accept. It was Claire. There was no denying it anymore. The coincidences were too many, the signs too obvious. On the 20th day of conversation, she suggested they could meet in person. The sentence came at the end of a message, casually, but the effect was immediate. Grant read and reread it for nearly half an hour. He replied the next day, pretending surprise and excitement. He asked where she'd prefer. She suggested a quiet cafe on a less busy street in the neighboring town. The place was neutral enough to seem casual, but close enough not to raise suspicion. From that moment on, the tension inside him deepened. Anxiety mixed with anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. He already knew, but he needed to see it. He needed to look her in the eyes at that moment to confirm it. There was no doubt left. Claire really was running that profile. And now she wanted to meet someone who, deep down, was her own husband in disguise. On the scheduled day, Grant woke up earlier than usual. He woke before his alarm, heart racing, mind already racing, as if his whole body was braced for what was coming. He showered in silence, made coffee like always, and sat at the table across from Claire, who was eating fruit and answering messages on her phone. She seemed calm, smiling, completely at ease in their usual routine. Over breakfast, she mentioned she'd be going out with her friends that night. Said they'd have dinner and maybe have a glass of wine afterward. Grant pretended to be surprised, smiled, and said he also had plans with his friends. He'd be playing basketball at a club on the other side of town, and they might grab something to eat after. The exchange was casual, with no apparent tension. Claire got up from the table, cleared the dishes, and went to the bedroom. Grant watched her from a distance, studying her movements, trying to spot any hesitation. But everything seemed normal. She carried on with her routine just like any other day. During the afternoon, he stayed busy at work, but time felt slower. Each passing minute increased the anticipation, the weight of what was coming. Around 5:30, he told his co-workers' group chat he couldn't make the game. It was just an excuse to keep up appearances. He left the office early, stopped home only to change clothes, and told Claire he'd meet his friends directly at the club. Meanwhile, she was getting ready in the bedroom. She wore a light dress and subtle makeup. Grant didn't say anything. He just watched for a few seconds and left. The drive to the cafe where he'd arranged the meeting was completely silent. The whole way, he kept thinking about what it would be like to see her in that setting. How he'd react. He arrived almost an hour early. He parked 2 streets away, walked to the cafe, and positioned himself across the street, near a small parking lot with a partial view of the entrance. He picked a discreet spot, shielded by a tree, and waited. Phone in hand, mind racing. Time passed slowly. People came and went from the cafe, some in groups, others alone. No familiar faces. Then, 15 minutes past the agreed time, Claire appeared. She walked calmly, hair tied in a simple bun, sunglasses, a small bag over her shoulder. She wore the same dress he'd seen at home, now perfectly suited to the setting. She glanced around quickly, like someone looking for a person, then went inside. Grant didn't feel immediate anger. What came first was an inner silence. A strange emptiness, as if the world around him had paused. He stayed still, unresponsive, just absorbing the scene in front of him. All doubts, all theories, everything had been answered in that moment. Claire was here. At the cafe. At the scheduled time. To meet a stranger who was actually him. That was undeniable. For a few minutes, Grant considered going in immediately. Stand up, cross the street, confront her right there in front of everyone. But he took a deep breath and held back. He needed to act with more clarity. More control. He waited a few more minutes, just watching. He confirmed every detail, every gesture, every movement he'd associated with his wife for years. She sat down, ordered something from the waiter, and started looking at her phone, probably waiting for a message from that fake profile. That's when Grant unlocked his phone and, still under the fake profile, sent a message. He said he was on his way but didn't know the place well, and asked her to describe which table she was at so he could find her easily. The reply came in under a minute. Claire said she was sitting near the side window, facing the entrance, wearing a light blue dress. Grant read the message silently, closed his phone, and put it in his pocket. Without hesitation, he started walking toward the cafe. It wasn't time to watch anymore. It was time to face it. Grant crossed the street with steady steps, each movement heavy, as if he were walking through a bad dream. The cafe ahead looked ordinary, peaceful, people chatting, waiters moving, a couple quietly laughing at an outside table. But none of that mattered. Everything around him had become background noise, because what was about to happen would shatter any sense of normalcy. He entered without hesitation. The moment he stepped through the door, his eyes landed on Claire, sitting exactly where she'd said. She was still looking at her phone, distracted, probably waiting for another message from the fake profile. She was calm, elegant, completely unaware of what was coming. Grant walked straight to her. Claire looked up when she sensed his presence. For a second, she seemed confused, like she couldn't understand why he was there. Then her expression changed, her face tensing suddenly, and the silence between them became deafening. Claire stared at him for a few seconds before breaking the silence. Her voice was weak, almost shaky, as she asked if it had been him all along. Grant nodded quietly. He explained that it was him who made the profile, who had been talking to her for weeks, who set up the meeting, and who was now standing in front of his own wife, seeing her there under a different name, waiting to meet a stranger. Each word carried a specific weight, direct and clear, as if he were simply stating irreversible facts. He wasn't shouting, wasn't showing rage, but the firmness in his voice made it clear this was a line that could never be uncrossed. Claire tried to say something, but her voice trembled. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that it was just a joke, that she never meant to actually meet anyone. She spoke quickly, stumbling over her words, as if trying to piece together an improvised excuse in front of evidence that left no room for doubt. Grant kept staring at her, expressionless. He waited for her to finish, then responded with unsettling calm. He said she'd had several chances to stop, when the conversation started, when they got more personal, when they made plans to meet. At every step, she chose to keep going. This wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice. She reached to touch his arm, but he subtly pulled back. Claire then suggested they talk at home, that maybe it would be better to sort everything out away from there. But Grant shook his head. He said there was nothing left to discuss. What needed to be said was already right in front of them. When she got home, her things should be packed. He wanted her to leave that same night. Claire's eyes widened, as if she'd finally grasped the seriousness of the situation. She still tried to argue, asked if he wouldn't reconsider, if they couldn't move past this. But he didn't answer. He stood up, looked at her one last time, and walked out of the cafe without looking back. Back in his car, Grant took a deep breath before starting the engine. There was no anger on his face, just deep exhaustion. He drove home in silence, parked in the garage, and went inside. He spent the rest of the night gathering photos, documents, and anything with emotional value from their shared bedroom. He sorted her belongings into boxes and left them in the hallway. Claire arrived around 11. She knocked gently, as if afraid of the sound of her own guilt. He opened the door, stepped aside to let her in, and said nothing. She looked around and saw the stacked boxes. No words were needed. No drama, no shouting. Just the raw realization that something had been broken. Claire left that night with the boxes. She took clothes, personal items, but also the weight of a choice that, even if justified someday, would never be forgotten. From that night on, the house was quieter. Grant didn't seek answers. He didn't want to understand her reasons. To him, what mattered was the fact, she had chosen to deceive. And he, in turn, had chosen to move forward. Trust, once broken, doesn't get fixed. It shatters. And what's left is the decision not to carry the pieces. Claire went back to her parents' house that same night, carrying boxes and regret. She avoided details, but couldn't hide the reason for the split. Her parents, surprised and disappointed, welcomed her in silence, not hiding their sadness over their daughter's choice. Meanwhile, Grant threw himself into work, using a busy routine to fill the emptiness the betrayal had left. He didn't talk about it, didn't look for explanations. He just kept moving forward, determined to rebuild his peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.